Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another webinar of the Institution of Public-Private Partnerships. Today, we are very honored to have Professor Jack Chang to join us. Jack obtained his PhD in civil engineering from Stanford University. His research interests include BIM, 3D GIS, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, computer vision, construction robotics, construction and facility management, green buildings, and smart construction. Jack is currently the chairperson of Hong Kong Construction Industry Council's BIM Standards Task Force. He is also honorary treasurer of the Hong Kong Institute of Building Information Modeling, a director of the Hong Kong Green Building Council, a member of the BIM Committee and the Construction Digitization Committee at CIC, and immediate past president of American Society of Civil Engineers, Greater China section. And also, Jack is an immediate past chairman of Autodesk Industry Advisory Board and alternative director of Hong Kong R&D Center, or LCSM, and a whole host of other things. So we're very honored that Jack has agreed today to talk on the topic of Industry 4.0, BIM and digital twin for PPP projects, and see how the two can intertwine and be used for collaboration. So Jack, if you're ready, I'll pass this webinar over to you.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so thank you very much for joining. Thank you, David, for introducing me. And it's actually my great honor to share with all of you the topic on BIM and Digital Twin Industry 4.0 on PPP. So let me try to share screen and see whether you can see. Okay, so is it fine?
Yeah,
okay, so let me start. Yes. So good afternoon, everyone, and it's actually my. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I'm very happy to share with you all of you on the topic of Industry 4.0 and BIM and Digital Twin for PPP project. So okay, and as David have introduced, I'm Jack Chang, and Professor and Associate Head of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Hong Kong University. And today I would like to share with you about my my experience and also my understanding of BIM and Digital Twin and its possible application for PPP projects. So in the upcoming 30 minutes, I would like to share with you my thought. This is just a quick introduction of myself. I not only have been working on the topics like BIM, GIS academically, but also I'm honored to have exposure in industry on the development of the BIM standards in Hong Kong, and also about Green Building Council, and also have involvement in the Hong Kong IPPP, etc. So I have civil engineering background, and that is why PPP will be of my interest, because many times it is actually a new direction of how we can design, construct, and also maintain the built infrastructure, no matter civil projects or building projects. So with civil engineering background, I'm happy that I can integrate the technology into the PPP concept. I would like to start with this diagram. Some of you may have seen this one. Now, actually, when we look at the construction productivity, we can find out that the construction is actually lagging behind of other like non-farm industry, like manufacturing. Basically, if we look at how many cars we can generate, we can produce every day, and how many buildings or how many building components we can produce every day. We don't have any improvement according to this chart, and this is actually the trend in the past 15 years. Basically, for non-farmland manufacturing, we can see that we have adopted a lot of technologies like the robotics or the production line, and also a lot of automation, digital technology. But for construction, we are really lagging behind. And that's why we actually have the hope that can we try to use the construction digitization, but for example, like BIM, IoT, digital twin, etc., robotic, so that we can bring up the curve. We can bring up the productivity. When we talk about Industry 4.0, I think you may have heard of this term many times. Basically, Industry 1.0 was in 18th century. We are talking about the industrialization era. So at that time, we try to have the steam power, we have a lot of machines, etc. And then 2.0 basically is the invention of the electricity so that we can mass produce the things, and then like the car manufacturing industry, etc. And then in 3.0, then basically we talk about the internet. We talk about the IT, okay? And that actually enable us to have a lot of automation. And now we are actually in the Industry 4.0 era. And basically we are talking about with all these infrastructure, we have internet, etc. Then how the virtual world can interact with the physical world, so that we try to digitize and also upkeep the digital model. And this is actually what we are talking about Industry 4.0. When we talk about Industry 4.0 in our industry, construction industry, then actually World Economic Forum have shown this diagram 2-3 years ago, talking about what are the technologies that can actually influence, okay, can change our industry. So this is, for example, you can see some hot topics like the prefabrication, the autonomous construction like drones, etc., 3D printing, cloud 3D scanning, and particularly BIM. And for BIM, if we look at more articles by World Economic Forum, then you can see, in fact, on the top left corner, you can see in 2018, World Economic Forum already have mentioned that the fourth industrial revolution will change our industry, construction industry. And actually, in another report, World Economic Forum also have listed many technologies shown on the right-hand side about the technologies that will be available to change our AEC industry. And you can see that the x-axis is the impact, y-axis is the maturity, and integrated BIM actually is the key. So it means that we actually should focus on the BIM technology and try to integrate this one with other technologies to realize this value. So that is why it is technology that we cannot ignore. And BIM technology is actually a hot topic in the past few years. So that's why in the following presentation, I would like to talk about, first of all, a brief introduction about BIM and digital twin. I think if you are in the industry, you should have known them already, so I will go through them very quickly. And then I would like to discuss more about the value of BIM and digital twin for PPP projects. Then I would like to share with you some key challenges of BIM and digital twin applications, so that this is actually some kind of recap for us, or reminder for us. And at the end, I would like to share with you some example of BIM and digital twin application. So first thing, I would like to share with you, if you have been in Hong Kong and working in construction industry, then you may, and you actually should have heard that for a public project exceeding 30 million Hong Kong dollars, the government need to use the BIM technologies since January 1st, 2018. So it actually has been mentioned in the 2017 policy address. And with that, and that is why the Development Bureau has have released the TECO circular in late 2017, talking about by January 1st, 2018, all public projects exceeding 30 million Hong Kong dollars need to use BIM. And I actually like the way that Hong Kong government or the industry actually push and promote BIM. Because later when we look at the other countries like UK cases, then you can see that they only talk about that they need to use BIM. Okay, but what do we want to use BIM for? Okay, so here it actually mentioned about the many BIM uses, particularly in the TECO circular. It has mentioned about the 20 specific BIM uses, and you can see that from design offering, space programming, etc. You can also see that they have O and M. O is optional, M is mandatory. And at the very beginning of the adoption, many of them are optional, but it actually also showed the industry that they are possible. So that if you are the pioneer, then you better actually get ready and then try to use that. Okay. And then after years, okay, so I actually fast forward, and then every year the TECO circular has been updated. And this version actually is the latest one, which was released end of last year. And you can see that in this BIM users table, most of them are already M. That means mandatory, not optional anymore. So this one actually will give us the message that when we talk about BIM, it's not only using BIM in the old way. Okay, we use BIM for others, like particularly like the cost estimation. Number 6, you can see is mandatory, and using BIM for others like the phase planning or for other kind of the analysis coordination, they are already mandatory, and this will also affect the design and construction of many infrastructure. And you can note that many PPP projects actually by nature, PPP projects involve government. Okay, so if government have this kind of pledge or commitment on BIM adoption, it means that no matter their project involve private or not private, PPP or not PPP, all projects will use BIM. Okay. And in 2019, Construction Industry Council in Hong Kong also have conducted a survey to see what is the BIM adoption. And it actually is a very wide coverage study which have included more than 700 organizations, including government departments, statutory bodies, contractor, and consultant. And you can see that at that time, actually, 56% are the BIM laggers, and only 9% will be the BIM leaders. And also, if you look at this one, the government actually is the one pushing the BIM technologies. If we look at the BIM users, we can also see that the top 6 BIM users are the 3D coordination, as BIM modeling, design authoring, design review, drawing production, and existing condition modeling. And the report also showed that among the 20 BIM users, actually like the asset management, those related to FM are quite lacking. So that also gives us some opportunities that if we want to use BIM for infrastructure projects, FM probably will be the next future. If we look outside Hong Kong, if we look at our country, China, then you can see that in 12 5-year plan, they already have mentioned about BIM. Okay, and then in the latest, the 13 5-year plan, they even also mention about they should not only push BIM, but they should actually try to speed up the adoption of BIM in a few things, including planning, design, construction, and FM. And basically, it means the whole life cycle. And something also interesting is they also would like to encourage the use of the BIM software locally developed. If we look at UK, they have the public commitment that by 2060, all the public projects need to use level 2. But actually, what is level 2? There's different definition. And also, they mentioned about level 3. So basically, level 1 BIM is the parallel working with 2D and 3D. Level 2 is we have the BIM model for different trades. Level 3, we have the server-based BIM, integrated BIM, lifecycle BIM. But after 2016, we actually did not hear too much about BIM adoption in UK because they already have evolved to another direction, which is the dual twin. You can see that in 2018, they have established another center by the government called the Center for Digital Build Britain. And the vision is to make the whole country, United Kingdom, to be a digital environment, which actually follow this the Germany principle. For example, it should satisfy the public good and also the value creation. It should have security, openness, quality, stuff like that. And when we talk about dual twin, basically in the built environment, we would have the BIM technology, which look at the microscopic. While for the microscopic, this is basically about the GIS. And I think right now we're talking about the integration between the two. BIM will focus more on the component base and also have a lot of the object-based modeling analysis, while GIS will focus more on the analysis or the comparison, the interrelationship, identification across different layers or across different dimensions. So I think they actually are complementary to each other, not only about the spectrum of the geospatial scope, but also about the thinking process. BIM focus on the object-based, GIS focus more on the coordinate and different layers. And these two actually can enrich each other. And with that, then we can see that now we're going to the trend of the dual twin to not only maintain the building, but also the whole city. And this will also affect like maybe the civil infrastructure project, because in a city, we should have both the civil infrastructure and also the building. And that is why we actually should not ignore the adoption of BIM and dual twin. But how about for PPP projects? I think for those of you who are attending right now, you may have some background about PPP. Basically, PPP, public-private partnership, have different models. They start from like design, build, and it depends on the level of involvement of the private sector in the public project. They can have like the build and finance, the BOT, etc. And there are many different types. Okay, and no matter which type, we still need to go through the certain stages like design, construction, and handover and maintenance. Okay, so when we try to look at them, then we also try to see what are the types of the projects. Initially, some people may think that PPP mainly only focus on civil infrastructures. Okay, but if we look at different categories of those projects, you can see that it covers the transport, like the roads, highways, the tunnels, etc., or the ports, the water treatment plant, etc. Those, of course, are civil infrastructure. But at the same time, there are also some examples of PPP projects, like schools, hospitals, etc., which involve both the government and also the private body. And these are also the PPP projects. So it means that when we talk about BIM for PPP project, it's not only limited to BIM or technology for the civil infrastructure project, but also building projects. I think some people, I emphasize this one because some people think that BIM is the building information model and only focus on building. But in fact, the BIM technology also have been adopted in some civil infrastructure projects, like the Penara Canal, or some dam project, some highway project, or the metro projects also have involved BIM. In Germany, as an example, they also have the initiative to use BIM for the infrastructure. And you can see that they have this, you can look at the details when you look at this report, but this report is in German. Basically, they have launched the documentation to try to support the adoption of BIM for the railways and also the transport projects. And this one actually shows that they have such a plan for the road connection and the rail connection in the past few years, and they actually all these projects use BIM. And in another example, we can see that for like airport can also use BIM, and this is an example in Mexico showing that with BIM we can better manage the documents. Like in that project, we have more than 10,000 documents, and also there are many sheets and many things need to be done, and all these can be coordinated using BIM. So particularly for PPP project, then we can see what are the benefits of BIM for PPP project. When we look at the literature, we are actually found out that this one actually shows the main benefits of using BIM for PPP infrastructure projects. I have highlighted the top 5. You can see that the top one is the reduction of the rework, the risk, etc. And also it can help to predict the cost, and also help to improve the production efficiency, help to enable more sustainable and informed decision, and also produce a more cost-effective design. And all these will be valuable for PPP projects. If we look at the nature of PPP, we can find something like the surface-oriented whole life cycle costing, innovation, and we involve the participants from both government and private body, risk allocation between the parties, the long-term relationship, also resource sharing. And now our construction projects actually have a lot increased complexity, fragmentation, and also the need for the collaboration. So that is why we see the opportunity to integrate BIM and PPP, because with BIM as the technology and PPP as the glue, okay, or as the facilitator on the organization level, then we can create or we can deliver the project in a better way. So in terms of the surface-oriented for PPP, BIM, or we talk about the dual twin. Dual twin basically is BIM plus IoT, and then it should have the feedback loop. And dual twin actually can help us to ensure the surface quality of infrastructure, because many PPP focus on the surface. For example, they would like to they have the tunnels, etc. What they care is maybe they can privately finance the project, but they will get back the money in the operation. So it is important to ensure the serviceability of the infrastructure, and digital twin actually can help us to achieve that. About the life cycle costing, we need to have the cost planning and also cost control. BIM actually can support us, and that also provide the way for evaluation of the value for money. And we can have different scenarios and then test whether that option would be good for costing, and we can even consider the cost in life cycle manner. Innovation. We would like to have different innovative technologies, and BIM actually focus on the digital, the data management. And this one actually will be the hub of data that can support the integration of different innovative technology. Participants in BIM, then in PPP, we need to involve both public and private bodies, and also maybe different parties. BIM actually allow us to have better trust, and because we have better transparency, we can have better collaboration. So that's why we build trust, and this can support the PPP needs. Another thing is about the risk allocation. For the risk in PPP, we would like to shift the risk or share the risk. And with BIM or dual twin, we can better assess, better identify, and better reduce the risk items before construction. So during the design stage, or if we upkeep the BIM model during the construction phase or even operation phase, we can actually identify potential risk. Then it's not only about shifting of the risk, but also minimization of the risk. For long-term relationship, because dual twin helps the monitoring and data management over time, so we can also use the dual twin concept or technology to ensure the long-term maintenance of the infrastructure. And the last one is resource sharing. When we talk about PPP project, we need to consider not only the money, but also like manpower, equipment, etc., the material. And BIM actually allow us to have better planning, quantification, and also management of all these resources. And we can also test different scenarios. So you can see that there's the value of BIM and dual twin for the PPP. Let me elaborate a little bit more. For PPP, we mentioned about it is important to have the early design, and BIM actually can support that. This is a curve we call the McNamee curve. The red color shows that the later the stage, the x-axis is the preliminary design, the schematic design, detailed design, construction, documentation, and all the way to construction and operation. And the red color, the line, actually shows that the ability to impact. And as we can see, the earlier stage, then the easier to make impact. While the green line shows the cost to change. The later we make changes, the high cost it will incur. So that's why we would like to shift the focus of the discussion, the coordination from the curve 3 to curve 4. And in this way, then BIM actually can support, because BIM allow us to have different scenario testing, different simulation, and also different visualization, so that we can identify problems, we can have better coordination and different kind of the prediction. And we talk about PPP actually would need the life cycle costing. One of the common use of BIM technology is the cost estimation. So now we can see that with BIM, then we can actually estimate the cost, and also we can use this one as the cost control. We can actually go through the timeline and see whether the cost incurred actually is what we want or what we planned, and see if there's any overrun. BIM also can support collaboration, and we can see that BIM have different stages. The level 1 is only about modeling, and this one only would support the documentation, but not much about collaboration. But when we go to the level 2, then we can have more interchangeable models, and then the model will talk to each other, and then we can have better comparison and coordination. And number 3 level, okay, the stage 3, basically is more about the integration. Basically, we would like to have different trade or different stages can integrate their model, integrate their design, integrate their thinking, so that they can have more consistent and more coordinated design, and also the construction and even the operation, the workflow. And then the number 4 is basically the IPT. And IPT is similar to the PPP concept. Basically, we would like to have a long-term application of BIM, so that horizontally and vertically, we have the integration and also the management of information, so that we really can create values, okay, for the client. Another application of BIM is it can support visualization. You can see that BIM can support virtual reality, and then we can see the virtual world. But more than that is, I would like to demonstrate we can use BIM to support like the mixed reality. And with that, then we can apply this one for operation and maintenance. And you can see that if we have the BIM model, and we have the information about all these components, then we can see whether the components are in good condition, and if not, then how to repair them. And later, then we can even use BIM to support the operation and maintenance of infrastructure in this kind of the futuristic way, using like the HoloLens. You can see that sometimes maybe we don't need to go to the site so often. As long as the site have the site workers, the site supervisors, then they can just have this kind of device to show what the site is about. And then remotely, the engineer or the decision maker can give the advice about how to do the, in this example, how to do the repair and maintenance, etc. We can also apply this example to like the design, like collaborative design, or even construction, so that we can do construction in a nicer way remotely. And if we talk about a global project, this will be good, so that I don't need to really go to the site so often. So when we talk about BIM and PPP, you can see that BIM actually have a few advantages on the PPP needs. And particularly on the left-hand side, it is the PPP workflow. And then on the right-hand side, it is the need for the BIM. For BIM, we should have the OIR, that means the organization information requirement. We need to know what the client actually needs. And then for that, then we also need to know what is the access information requirement, so that we will build a corresponding model. We should also know what's the employee information requirement. That means what will be the one who actually do the procurement, and then what is the actual need for the project. And with that, then we should actually embed this one to the workflow of the PPP project. And we should have something like a BIM execution plan, and then develop the access information model so that we can have better handover. With that, then we can show that this one with the different PPP stages. In the initial stage, we need to define the OIR, EIR, so that we define what will be the information requirement. And then in the management level, then we should also define what will be the tools, what will be the workflow. And then in the procurement, then we should refer to the standardization, etc. And implementation, then we should define the information exchange. We should define what will be the workflow, the timeline, etc. So with all these, then you can see we have talked about the BIM and Digital Twin technology have a lot of values that can potentially enhance the PPP projects. But when we work on BIM and Digital Twin, no matter it's PPP project or not, actually there's something that we need to be careful, okay, in the adoption. And I would like to share with you as a reminder. First one is there's a study and in the literature has mentioned about what are the main costs of BIM for the infrastructure PPP projects. And you can see these are the top 5. The first one is actually we need the BIM standard. Okay, we need to have the standard so that they actually talk to each other, particularly for the whole life cycle, or different software, okay, or different people. And this is important. Otherwise, then we have the technology, but we don't have consistent evaluation or consistent information flow. And second, actually second, third, and fourth are quite similar in the score. And you can see we need to change the workflow. We also need to purchase the software and also need to train the people. Okay, hardware is also important. So basically, they are the cost, or the cost of the hardware, software, and also the people. If we elaborate that a little bit more, first of all, one challenge we need to solve is the standard. Standard, we talk about both data standard and the workflow standard. For data standard, common software for BIM like the Revit, ArchiCAD, etc. They may not talk to each other, and they have different data standard. Of course, I can export maybe Revit into IFC, which is an open standard, so that I can import into ArchiCAD. But the thing is, there may be some information loss, or maybe there's some the parametric information embedded in the object may not be transferable, okay, to other software. So this is something that we need to consider. And we talk about the dual twin cover not only BIM but also GIS. And this is also the agenda item of UN. They would like to see whether they can develop the open standard for GIS, and while the Building Smart International try to develop the open standard for BIM, and there's collaboration between them. And also file format, scope, the level of information need, etc., all need to be consistent and all need to be well defined, okay, before the project. Second is about the workflow. We not only have the data, but how to use the data, how to use the model. And we should actually refer to the standard like the ISO standard 19650, or in Hong Kong, or local standard in Hong Kong, then we refer to the CIC BIM standard. In ISO 19650, there's also the UK BIM framework talking about the standard. And actually, I would like to recommend the one highlighted here is by RICS, talking about the BIM execution framework on the PPP, okay, particularly for estimation. And you see that now we actually need planning, okay, so that we can really realize the technology, the value of the technology. Another thing is about consistency over life cycle. When we talk about PPP, we often will cover more than one phase. And that is why information interoperability between different phases will be important. And to do so, we have a term called the CDE, Common Data Environment, so that the not only standard, but also the infrastructure, so that the information can transfer from one location or one phase to another phase. This is important because sometimes the problem of one phase may actually come from the earlier phase. And if the information are siloed, are isolated, don't connect, then it will be difficult to trace the problem. Another thing to consider is about the correctness. Okay, whether when we talk about information, okay, data, we need to make sure that all these data are correct, consistent, and complete. Okay, garbage in, garbage out. If we make decision using bad information or incomplete information, okay, and then wrong information, we cannot make good decision. And that is why no matter what kind of project, if we use BIM for managing the data, we need to check the data quality. And another thing, or the last one, is about the information security. As we actually have more infrastructure to be digitized in BIM, then all this information will be sensitive. For example, some PPP projects will be related to the national security, or maybe I've seen some PPP project about like prison. If let's say you can imagine that if the floor plan, okay, of the prison is released to the public, then it may have some national security issue. So that's why some information, or maybe some may be broken, for example, some repair information, all this information should be securely stored and shared. Okay, and this is something that the new ISO 19650 is talking about the information security. And with all these, those are only technical. But I would also like to emphasize that many times in the technology adoption, it's not only technical. People are also the key. If you only focus on the technical, maybe technical is ready, but people may be the bottleneck that maybe the upper management will not be willing to use. So we need to have the incentive and willingness, or maybe the working level don't know how to do that. Okay, so we need to build up the capability. We also need to change the workflow, the process. So that's why we need a clear and consistent agreed workflow within the whole team. Okay, not only the project. If it is maybe cross multiple phases, we should have all people together so that that we can actually create the value. And note that all this technology should be purpose-driven. We need to identify what are the values that we want to create, okay, so that we use the technology accordingly, okay. And the last one, I would like to quickly go through some examples of PPP, of BIM and dual twin application. This one is a PPP project in Manchester, UK, about hospital. And you can see that these are the values that after the project have been mentioned. With BIM, they can actually they can conduct the value engineering. They can really identify the value and then make sure that they are created even in the design stage. Okay, and then they have better collaboration, communication. They also have high accountability, which will be required by the public sector. All those information, especially the cost information, will be well documented, and also the costing and consideration can be the whole life cycle. And this is something that BIM actually can achieve. And this is another example of the BIM application for infrastructure project. And this is an airport project in Netherlands. You can see that they have the so-called the dual asset twin. They use BIM to capture the model, and then they use this one for the facility management. Basically, they use the dual twin to capture all this data of the geometric information, also the documents, all the status, all the incidents, etc., and connect with different systems. And with that, then they can better manage the asset and provide a good service level, okay, for the airport. And for example, sometimes when they have renovation, they will also make changes to the model, and so they always have a single source of truth, okay, to upkeep the record, so that later when they have others like maybe planning, then they can refer back to the digital model for better execution. Now this is also interesting that they also use open standard IFC in the project, that they will link the information across different trades, different disciplines, and they even build up their own dictionary. Okay, so that they link up the BIM model with their own specific the system. So what they have created is something like this. They have the information management platform with BIM as the core, okay, digital twin as the core, and link with other information, so that they can do better searching. Let's say there's something broken, then they can search quickly what are the problem, okay, or is there any similar problem earlier, something like that. Another dual twin application I would like to share. This one is not PPP, but I just want to share the application about dual twin is we also have been involved in the development of dual twin for the entire Hong Kong University campus. And you can see that we actually built a 3D model of the entire campus of more than 60 buildings. You can see that what we've done in the past 1-2 years is we constructed the BIM model of 60 plus building of more than 500,000 meters square. We also validate all these BIM models using laser scanning, and also we have created a consistent room tag and room attributes, okay, so that we can perform the space management. For example, we want to see what are the spaces used by a certain department or particular BIM, particular use type, etc. And then we can generate different color layout, or maybe we can actually link this one to the FM system. We also use develop our own platform, okay, to help people identify the location and the surrounding area in the app. We also use BIM to have better simulation of the engineering perspective, like the air quality, the energy, etc., so that we can achieve a low carbon design, and it can also save the energy use. And like this one, we can optimize the operation. And with that, then we can also not only save the energy cost, and maintain the IQ, but it somehow also help us to maintain the operational serviceability, the service level. And with that, then this is also something that may be related to also infrastructure. Okay, so this is only one example that with the 3D model, we can have better planning of different scenarios. And this is also another example that we have conducted is using BIM. We connect with the FM system and BMS system so that remotely, then we can link with the BMS system to see what is the reading, what's the maybe condition of the building, condition of the system. Let's say if we have solar panel, what is the amount of the generate and electricity that we have generated, something like that. Okay, so all these are the examples. Okay, and even we can enhance the workability. So if we have building clusters, we would like to see from one location to another location how we can go easier for different needs. For example, with wheelchair or elderly with different preference, we can also use BIM for. So with all of these, I just want to share with you that we talk about the PPP, or now we are talking about smart city. And in fact, BIM technology or even digital twin, okay, with the IoT can help us to achieve the smart city. We have the AIM, BIM, CIM, or even the GIM, LRM, or even now we're talking about the heritage information model, etc. Plus the GIS, then can help us to achieve the smart city. And this one is also important because as we talk about PPP project, no matter it's civil infrastructure or buildings, if the government have a plan of building a smart city, then this will come into place. So the last one I would like to share is, it's time for change. And I hope that you can see that this is the technology trend that our industry is adopting, and there's no way return. So it's only one way direction, one way road. And I hope that in the past, we talk about whether we should do BIM, but now we are already talking about how we should do BIM. And this one will also affect the PPP projects. So this is actually what I would like to share with you today. And thank you all for, thanks the invitation of IPPP again for me to share with you this topic. And I would like to see whether there's any question. And may I pass time to David to see any Q&A. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So, thank you, Professor Jack Cheng, for a very, very informative and very scintillating presentation. Okay, we have some time now for question and answers. So you can type in your questions into the Q&A. But I myself have a couple of questions. Jack, previous industry standards have taken decades to be accepted. How quickly do you think it will take the industry to adopt BIM4 or this digital twin? And secondly, what are the resistance to this adoption?
Okay, yeah, thanks, David. It's a good question. In fact, I think you are also one of the early adopter of BIM, and you actually have seen that BIM has been adopted in Hong Kong for quite some time, more than a decade. But only these recent few years, we see some changes in terms of the rapid adoption. And with that, then I found out that policy is very important. And it's actually hard for me to see or to predict what will be the policy that can encourage. But I can see that with the BIM ready, I can see, at least in the global trend, many or more people have already the infrastructure. That means the digital model ready. As in the past year, when we talk about digital twin, we don't even have the digital model. But now we have more the BIM model ready. And I think the time to adopt digital twin will be shorter than the time to adopt BIM. But it really depends on the incentive. Sometimes or many times, it's not the industry would have no ability to do that. It's that they don't have incentive. If there's no policy, they don't do that. Okay, and that is why I think we should have some. That's why I've mentioned it's not only about the technology, it's about the people and about the policy. But I would say that now right now with the COVID-19, it somehow helped a little bit about the adoption, because more people need to work from home, and then they also are more willing or more or they see the value of the digital model or this kind of digital operation. Okay, so I think I don't have crystal ball, but I think maybe within 5 years the landscape will be quite different. And about the major challenge, as I mentioned, policy is one. Okay, and another thing, as I've shared in the presentation, I think is also about the cost. Because we talk about, particularly if we talk about PPP, for government, then it's about the policy, but for commercial, it's about money. If they need to have a lot of cost, the cost actually relate to the people training, relate to the software, relate to hardware. Okay, and many people complain about the software. Okay, it's quite costly, and also the people is quite expensive to train up people. So I think in Hong Kong, it's very special case that we have the CITF to support, but in other countries they don't. Okay, in other regions they don't, and I think that will be a major bottleneck for, particularly for PPP, is the money.
Okay, we have a question from Billy Tan. He asked, explain the relationship between BIM and digital twin.
Okay, it's actually good point. So in digital twin, basically is you can consider is BIM plus IoT. Okay, I actually should share with you another diagram. Is that the digital twin, or what was digital twin? Basically, is twin. Okay, that means we have the cyber physical world.
Share screen again. Sorry.
Sorry.
You can use the share screen to share the diagram.
Oh, okay. Well, I may need to. Anyway, maybe just verbally I can mention. Okay. For dual twin, basically is the integration of. Let me see. Okay. Okay. So the dual twin basically is the integration of the BIM with IoT, and also we need to make sure that the BIM, the digital representation reflect the real world. Okay, so that means we need to have the upkeeping of the BIM model. Okay, so the BIM model should be live. Okay, it should be a live model. So dual twin, I'll put it this way, dual twin basically is a BIM model with life. Okay, and then we should upkeep the BIM model. Okay, so that we can have the latest version and reflect the real situation. And even maybe dual twin can allow us to interact with the real world. Okay, so that's why it's called twin, physical twin and the dual twin. Okay, physical twin and dual twin. Okay, they actually should have the collaboration joining hand in hand. Okay, and another thing is to achieve that we also need IoT, because IoT basically with the updating the BIM model would be a lot of work, but IoT basically tell us about what is the condition of the built environment. Okay, so that's why one definition or one interpretation understanding of dual twin is BIM plus IoT. Okay, but fundamentally, basically is the cyber physical system, so that the digital world and the physical world can reflect each other and also can interact each other. I hope it's clear.
Okay. Another question is that from another of the attendees is, can we integrate BIM with blockchain technology for IPPP?
Good point. In fact, we also have done something similar. Okay, and for the blockchain, we have integrate the blockchain. Now we are actually working in a ITF project on using blockchain to secure the data from design stage all the way to the FM. And in that project, we try to not only using blockchain, basically, we also use encryption so that we have the traceability and also the traceability and also the the irreversibility. That means we want to make sure that the data actually can be traced and also cannot be changed. So that, for example, in the design stage, then who have made changes will be known. And when there's some problem, then we can trace back who actually has that particular version, upload that particular version, something like that. Even for operation, okay, if someone has changed the layout, then we also blockchain that. So yes, we are actually working on this one.
Okay. So I mean, for PPP projects, financing and cost and budget is actually very important. What you mentioned, having a digital twin being live, that would be very useful for the funding of such projects, to be keeping track of budget and costs.
Yes.
That's one of the main advantages of having this digital twin.
Sorry, so the question is,
having a digital twin, is it advantageous for funding purposes to control the cost and budget?
As I mentioned, I think, well, that is why I've mentioned, I think about the cost, I think BIM is already okay. Not it depends on how we define BIM and digital twin. Okay, to me, I think with BIM model, with we call the fifth dimension, the 5D, then we already have the cost information in the planning stage. We can know whether we need financing or not, or how much we need to do financing. And in the operation, in the construction, then we can see what has been spent is the same as what is planned. And if there's any deviation, we can identify early. Okay, so BIM actually allows us to do so. Okay, but although this is the concept, but in fact, behind the scene, it's not that easy. Okay, because for example, for BIM model, if we draw the model in different ways, I actually also mentioned in my class that, for example, like a T-shaped wall. Okay, we have two walls. If we draw in different sequence, the volume of the walls may be different. And then we may have inconsistent or different results in terms of costing. Okay, so yeah, that's why we need to have the standard way or standard approach of modeling so that costing can be accurate. Especially if, I think for order of magnitude it's easy, but if we use it for tendering, then I think we need to go for some standard, or we need to be more careful about the modeling, etc.
Another question on the chat is is it worth to have any partnership projects with researchers and FM firms to develop and promote the use of BIM and digital twin in Hong Kong? And is there any support for this from government?
Good question. I think Hong Kong is fortunate to have the CIC, Conscious Industry Council, to support and promote BIM technology in the industry. They also have R&D fund to support some BIM projects, but not much, frankly speaking. And also, the government have allocated 10 billion, 1 billion Hong Kong dollars on establishing the CIDF. And part of that will be used for supporting BIM training and also BIM software procurement. And that will help. Okay. And but about the R&D, I think, frankly speaking, if we talk about theoretical research, it may be difficult. But for applied research, I think CIC Research Fund would be one of them. Or another channel would be the ITF, the Innovation and Technology Fund, okay, which support BIM. For example, I'm working on a project with BIM and blockchain. And also another is BIM with the IoT. Okay, so if we have industry partners, that will be even better, so that we can see the value of the R&D. And if you have any ideas, we can further discuss later.
So basically, the government has put some money there for research, and it's up to the industry to step forward and help out with, universities like Hong Kong USC to get the research going.
Yes, but it's not easy. It's
not easy, yeah. Well, thank you very much. Our time is up, and thank you everybody for coming and listening. So we hope you join us again for our next installation of the IPPP webinar. Yeah. Today we thank you. We give thanks to Professor Jack Cheng for his talk on digital twin, and I find it to be very interesting and to be totally new in this topic for BIM and also IPPP. We hope we can do more on this together in the future. Thank you, Professor.
Yep, thank you, David, and thank you, IPP, for the invitation. Okay, thank you, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.